Here we go. Good evening and welcome to the Accidental Journalist episode 4 with Michael Fenton Stevens. Today's episode is sponsored by author Gary Rogers and his book Undercover Policing and the Corrupt Secret Society Within. As you may remember, I spoke to Gary a couple of months ago about his life. We're going to try and get him back on for part 2. Tonight I'm talking to Michael Fenton Stevens.
That's me.
He's the guy that people have said that they heard of the name and they kind of know the face, but they don't know where from. So, yeah, Michael, thanks for coming on.
That's all right, mate.
It's great to see you. Yeah, can we go? I want to find out about your life and where you come from and how you got into what you do.
I'll take you right back. I'll take you right back to the very beginning of it. Really, I was born in Bermondsey, southeast London, so I'm a Rotherhithe boy. My family all of my father's family were dockers. They all worked on the docks. Most of my cousins were brought up in that area, and my father, when he left the army, he went to night school and studied, bookkeeping, I think probably, but he had beautiful handwriting. But he started to study the law, and he he became a solicitor, which is quite a jump, really, from a docker's son.
Yeah.
So as a result of that, when we were very young, we lived just in a very small house in Bermondsey. But again, owning your own house was something. Never had a car or anything, but as time went on, his income grew, and he did the thing that a lot of South London people do, which is he moved out to the countryside. So he moved to Orpington, which he regarded as the countryside. It's not really as sort of suburbia. And because he had come from this very London family, and with a strong Cockney accent, all of them, and been brought up that way, he was also a bit of a mimic, my dad. He had the ability to sort of mimic other people's voices. And I think I've sort of inherited it from him, really. I certainly learned it from him, because I watched him many times. I worked with him in the courts. Later on, I was going to be a solicitor. Having gone to school and everything, I was destined to follow in his footsteps. And I was training as a solicitor, so I worked with him for a while before I went off to university. And I watched him many times talking to, Lord Hutchinson or someone who was his barrister. And he, in those circumstances, would almost become, I think he learnt his posh accent from the actor Robert Donat. I don't know if you know who the actor Robert Donat is, but he's in the 39 Steps.
Yes.
A very famous black and white film, The 39 Steps. What are the 39 Steps? And Robert Donat had one of those voices that just was incredibly posh and really sort of swallowed. And my father would talk like that to barristers, and they talked back to him in exactly the same voice. And they would talk about, well, H. They called him H because his name was Harry. H. I mean, the man's an absolute rogue. Yes, I know, but he claims he didn't do it, and that was it. And then he would walk 5 paces to where the family of the person he was defending was standing and say, "All right, so Lord Hutchinson says, he's going to do his best for your boy, all right." And that was the nature of him. He was very chameleon, and I watched him do it, and therefore I sort of picked it up from him, I think. And I think that may have been the thing that sort of stood me in good stead when I first started acting, because I got into acting. I went off to university to study law, and I did a lot of acting while I was there. I was very keen on it, but I had no idea of how you would actually do that. If you come from a family where nobody's ever been involved in acting, it seems a very strange world, very alien. You're never going to get into it. You sort of feel, well, it's only people whose parents were actors can become actors. and it looked that way in many cases. But and I didn't know how to get in drama school or any of those things. Again, that seemed a thing that posh kids did. So so I went off and studied law, and I was working on it. But I did loads and loads of plays, and then I auditioned for the Edinburgh Festival. I was so in love with acting. I completely fell for it, and I never got bored with it. So I would, anytime anybody said, "Do you want to do this play, or do you want to be involved in this play in any way?" While I was at university, I said yes. While I was there, I performed in 33 different plays in 3 years. So I did a lot, and I went up to the Edinburgh Festival at the end of my second year. I was auditioned for the Edinburgh Festival by Angus Deaton, who was a student at the time, and we went up there and did the review. And from that review, when we finished that review in Edinburgh, we were offered a record deal for a parody. We did parody pop groups. We parodied the Bee Gees and all sorts of people. And they said, "Do you want to do an album?" We said, "Okay." So we signed a deal to do an album. And we also got offered a radio series for Radio 4. So I became a proper actor. I was being paid to become an actor, and I was still a student. So and of course, that being in having this album that a number of people noticed, and we had a lot of reasonable success. That opened doors for performing, and it opened the doors for me into the world of advertising, making money. So I was very lucky when I first started. Almost everything I did sort of fell in my lap a bit, but all because of this one coincidence that I'd happened to walk into a room and audition for Angus. And we did the radio series together, and me, Angus Deaton, Philip Pope, Helen Atkinson Wood, and Geoffrey Perkins, who was a very funny performer, but he's better known as a producer. He's dead now, sadly, but he produced endless things: Saturday Night Live, Father Ted, Spitting Image, just an endless number of things. He was a brilliant producer and a brilliant man. Anyway, we all worked together for, I think, on and off. We worked together for about 13 years at the beginning of my career. We did 7 radio series together. We toured Britain and all over the world about 4 or 5 times. And we went up to Edinburgh 3 times. And we released 2 albums. We had a brilliant time, as you can imagine. And we got signed up to do the Guinness adverts. When right early on, very early on, I was all of us got signed to represent Guinness. And to give you an idea of what that meant at the time, I remember at the time I was married. I got married very quickly after I left university. Fell in love when I was at university. We got married and we went straight into having a family. So my wife was 21. I was 23 when we had our first child. And that led me to think, well, perhaps I should try and buy somewhere, which is why I now live in Tunbridge Wells, because I couldn't really afford anywhere in London. And we moved out to Tunbridge Wells. And then almost immediately I did these adverts for Guinness. And I do remember an old lady who used to be Auntie Mary, who used to live next door to us in Bermondsey and looked after us children after school, would feed us and everything before both my parents came back from working. They were both working full time. And, to make ends meet, really. My mum was a cleaner in a school and then did all sorts of other jobs. But when she died, bless her, Auntie Mary, she left me £3,000. And I remember at the time thinking, well, that is going to see me through about the next 4 or 5 months. And that was how much money it seemed to be. We were very relieved by it. And then I did a Guinness advert. And by that time, we were represented by Harvey Goldsmith, who was a very big, he organized Live Aid. That's how big he was. He was the promoter who organized Live Aid, and he was putting on these massive acts, but he also was our manager. It was madness. God knows why. Anyway, it was good fun, and he managed to take the initial offer of the Guinness people, which was for £3,500. They said, we'll pay you £3,500 to do these Guinness adverts. And we all went, oh, wow, And he went, and then he went, yeah, no, fuck off, and put the phone down. And I remember standing there thinking, oh my God, this man's ruined my life. What, he's just turned down this enormous amount of money. And in the end, Guinness paid us £22,500.
Nice.
Yep, which was enough. I bought my first house for 28. So in comparison, you can imagine how much money that felt like getting.
Yeah.
It was enough to buy a house. So that's the way to start a career, as far as I'm concerned. It was brilliant. And I've been very fortunate ever since. I've sort of almost continuously worked and had a brilliant time, although I've made no real effort at all, I have to say. I've never really tried. I've never done any training. I've never even, I'm good at learning lines. I always put a lot of effort into making sure I know the lines for things. But I've sort of left it up to sort of instinct and luck, I think. And I've never been a great networker or pursued work or anything, but it just seems to have come along all the time. I think probably because I just had this fabulous start. And it also, because of the nature of the work that I do, which is mostly comedy, I tend to go from job to job very quickly in all sorts of things. If you're a theatrical actor, so a theatre actor, you may end up doing a play for 4 or 5, 6 months, even longer. You may be doing it for a year and a half if you tour the world with it or something. If you're in Shakespeare, you may do that for 9 months. So your CV will be 1987, 2 plays, and you don't get a chance to do time or anything to do anything else. Whereas me, 1987, was probably 8 television programs, 10 adverts, a play, 5 radio series. So my CV is absurd. It's enormous. People sometimes look at it. I've gone in for things. They go, "This goes on, doesn't it?" And it's just a great list of things I've been in. So very lucky. I've worked with loads of really lovely people, and I've had a brilliant time. And I think that sort of sums it up. I think that's how it all started, anyway.
Nice. So
Nice, I know. Yeah, nice is a good word.
how did you get involved with Spitting Image?
That came because the group we were in doing the parodies of pop groups. That was the early 80s. So we first did it, I think, 1979. We first performed it, and then we released a single in 1980, and then an album in 81, and another album in 83. And that was before Spitting Image. So we were approached to provide the music for Not the 9 O'Clock News, I think, at one point. But we said no, we didn't want to do it. God knows why. Anyway, we were then approached. Philip Pope, who was the musician, who was the main singer on it, really. Me and Angus were in it, but we used to sort of hang on to his coattails and just be dragged around the world having a brilliant time. He had most of the talent, and he was asked whether he would come and be the musical director of Spitting Image, and he said, yeah, obviously. So he then immediately wanted to surround himself with people who knew how he worked and he knew could do it, because you can get really, really great singers. And I have to say, for Spitting Image, they really did get great singers. You could get the best. They had a sort of a booker, a man called Graham Perkins, who used to book, all the top singers, so all the people who sang on all the adverts and everything. And even to this day, I remember doing sessions with a fellow called Lance Ellington, who sings on Strictly Come Dancing, even now in his 60s, I suppose. But what a voice! What a great voice! He was the man who sang the Gillette advert theme.
I remember that.
that?
Yeah.
The best a man can get.
Yeah.
And that's his voice. So he's been incredible. But also Tessa Niles, who I think was David Bowie's backing singer, just Madeleine Bell. There's just incredible singers came and did this thing. But at the same time, you needed people who could sing, but be funny. And you may be a great singer, but that's not necessarily how it's going to be for you. So he always brought me in. I always came in. I do remember once being, because I always came in and I would turn up sort of half an hour early before all the other singers, because I don't read music. So everything was by ear. And I would turn up and say, "What are we singing, Phil?" And he'd say, "Oh, it's this." You'd usually hear the band practicing. So I'd get the idea of the tune of the song. And I said, "What do you want me to sing?" And he said, "Well, it's a harmony and it goes like this." And he'd play it for me on the piano or something. And I'd go, "Okay, yeah, okay." So I'd get a chance to practice before everybody else turned up. Then he would hand the music out and we would all sing it. They were reading the music and I'd learnt my part, as it were. And the booker, Graham, never realized that I couldn't read music. And one day after a session, he said to me, "Do you fancy doing an advert tomorrow? I've got an advert for a thing called KP Dips." That's what it was. So little sticks that you dipped into. You remember them? So anyway, they were going to do this big session for them. And so I turned up at this. I said, "Yeah, great. And the money, singing on an advert, it's great money." So I turned up for this thing. And it was the same crowd of people, really. But there was also a full orchestra in this studio and a full rock and roll band. And we were doing a version of an Elvis Presley song where basically there were 8 of us who were going to sing the backing, 8-part harmony for the backing, really, really close harmony stuff. And one person who was a brilliant Elvis impersonator who was going to do the Elvis, he was going to do that sort of thing. And the musical director said, "Okay, everybody got your parts? Right, here we go then. Right, we'll go from bar 6 and 2 and they all started singing in 7-part harmony. And this idiot went, "Oh, oh." He said, "Hey, whoa, what's going on? Who's singing the E?" And I went, "C, D, E, me." And he went, "Well, yeah, it's, you all right?" I said, "I don't read music." And he nearly fell on the floor. Couldn't believe that for this massive session with all these people that they had to do in an hour. And Graham went, "What do you mean you don't read music?" I said, "I don't read music, Graham." He said, "But I said, "No, I learn it. I learn it every week. If you play it to me and I'll learn it, but I can't read it." So they had to stop the thing for 10 minutes while they taught me the part. And it was one of the most embarrassing things when you realize that you're out of your depth. You're in amongst a bunch of people who are all top professionals and you're blagging it, absolutely blagging it. I was. But it's interesting. I've had, we may have mutual experiences. I do remember before I became all that, I worked as a solicitor's clerk and I went all over the country. But basically the job that my dad gave me, because he thought it would be a good education for me, was he said he would send me off to meet people who were on remand.
Yeah.
And people who'd been sentenced and sort of, take them things and everything. So I've been in nearly every top security wing of every prison in the country, which was, it's an extraordinary, it was a good lesson at 17, I have to say. It's something that I think that I've always felt that it would be a good idea for everybody to have a school trip there.
Well, the two opposing worlds.
Yeah. And if you're ever going to think about, if you think you're tough and you think you can cope with prison, just go and visit I visited for, hours. And I knew then I'm never going to go in there. Never going to go in. I saw there was a brilliant man. I was involved in his trial. I won't say his name because I'm sure he's dead by now, sadly. But he was a con artist. He was a very sweet con artist. He was really a gigolo. That's what he was. He sort of chatted up older ladies and then formed acquaintances with them, and then they sort of looked after him, And he was a very handsome man, had been a model, and he somehow rather stupidly got involved in something and was convicted of armed robbery. Whereas in fact he was in a room and they were doing a con where they were going to con somebody out of jewelry, and then the other person who was with him drew a gun. So they were all convicted of armed robbery, and he was as well.
Accessories to the fact.
He got 17 years. 17.
That's
17 years. He was about 30 at the time. And I'd seen him all through this trial, very sort of, suave, self-assured, very good-looking man. And I went to visit him in Strangeways prison about 6 months later. And all his hair had fallen out. And he'd gone, he'd just gone lined, and most of his teeth had fallen out. He just couldn't cope with it at all. And I'm I'm sure it was a death sentence for him.
Yeah.
I was completely aware at the time that this was a man who would, I mean, this person could easily, the person they were nicking the jewelry from was also somebody who was a crook, and I just can't, I could never understand why this man needed to go to prison for 17 years. It never made any sense to me. I couldn't see what we were gaining from it as a society. I couldn't see what good it was doing. Anyway, those sort of lessons, those sort of salutary lessons, I think, would be useful for all over the place. We ought in fact, uh, people watch the Shawshank Redemption and things like that, and they all think, oh, it's got almost a romantic view of these things, but it's nothing romantic about it at all. I will never forget the smell of a prison. Never, it's the smell I remember mostly. So I will never forget. I went into Brixton Prison once to see a man called Yosser Arif, who I think may still be alive, and they took me to see his brother. The police got it confused. The guards got it confused and took me to see his brother. And I think this is right. Yosser Arif was in there for supplying arms for a robbery. So not the worst crime, but his brother was in there for armed robbery and for attempted murder. And they took me to see the wrong brother. And when I walked into the room, I said, this is not the man I want to see. And I'd been right through the high security wing of Brixton Prison. And what I remember about it is a lot of people shuffling around in slippers and dressing gowns because they were on remand. They didn't have to wear prison uniforms, so they wore their own clothes. And all the netting at every level, to stop people trying to kill themselves. And then also the fact that they were piping through the loudspeakers, "Oh, for the wings of a dove." Do you know that piece of music? A sort of piece of choral. "Oh, for the wings of a dove."
Yeah, my granddad used to play
this
that.
this angelic music was playing in the background, and I thought, what's that supposed to do? Calm them down? It was really, and God, they stink, don't they stink?
Yeah, I mean, it's like a hospital. It's got a hospital's got a smell that you associate to it. A prison's got a smell you associate to it. It's the sounds for me.
Sounds right.
That bring it back. Like if I'm walking across like a metal bridge.
Oh yeah.
Like wearing boots, you can hear that it's the boots on the metal gangway outside the door. So boots of the black and whites that are walking past.
I bet.
I hear keys, keys jangling. I have to look. It's been a long time, a long 20 odd years since I've set foot in one of them places, apart from visiting family. But it's not an easy place. I think you have to have a certain constitution to be able to deal with that sort of place. It's not for everybody.
No. When I think really probably for very few people, and actually anybody who thinks well, I'm tough, I'm all right, I could cope with it, and that sort of thing. They're the people who are going to be sobbing in their cell on the first night, and I've seen a lot of people who were very, very tough men. I mean, really, really frighteningly tough people who didn't seem to give a damn about anything. And then I've gone to visit them once they've been sentenced before they get taken away and watch them, gibbering wrecks because they know what's coming. And it's a horrible thing. So, I don't think we ought to disguise it. I think people ought to know about it. It's like all these things. Don't. I can't understand why they've taken so long to show footage of what's going on in the intensive care units at the moment, and with COVID. I can't understand why they've taken so long to show that, because it's really, people should have seen it and should have been told about it. Because I remember in April talking to somebody a nurse I know who works in intensive care, and I said, how's it going? She went, it's really, really horrible. It's the most horrible thing I've ever had to do. I cry every day. And I went, really? She said, yeah, I'm a trained professional person. My
Mm.
job is to save people's lives, and I'm really good at it. I'm really, really good at it, she said. And at the moment, I feel completely useless. People come in, and the best I can do is mop their brow, you know. And she said, it's
Yeah.
just awful. So,
Yeah.
these things, we sometimes hold these things back from people, I think, We hold as if, old people find it, you might find this upsetting. They often say that on the television, don't they?
Oh,
You might find this upsetting.
yeah, and what I find more upsetting is ignorance.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
you know, I've been there. Granted, it's been a long time since I've been inside, but I work with people, who write books about, they've been inside. Some of them, these
Hmm.
people are still on life license,
Yeah.
but they've been out years. Now, the conversation that I had the other day was about prison reform,
Yeah.
with a very good author by the name of Terry Ellis.
Right.
And he's just written a book called Living Amongst the Beasts, and one
Hmm.
about how to survive in HMP. And they say about prison reform, but there isn't any prison reform. There's too much
No.
money to be had in taking the freedom away from people.
Hmm.
It's ridiculous. It's all
And
contracts.
it's been shown again and again and again that actually educating people whilst they're in prison, that often lack of education is one of the main reasons for people falling into the world of crime in the first place. I
It
mean, what
is.
other options do they have?
It
Either
is.
complete poverty or working a job that is complete drudgery, which has no future, and you can be taken away from you at the moment,
Mhm.
or some sort of crime which seems rather attractive and can pay rather well, and people will sell it to you that way when you're young. Of course they will.
Oh,
They
yeah, of
will
course
say
they
to
will.
you, well, come with us, we're going to do a job, it'd be easy. We just walk in, take it, walk away. It's no trouble, nothing
Mm.
to worry about. It's easy. Nobody will ever know it's us. Next thing they know is a knock on the door.
Yeah.
And the people who organize it, you can't grass on them, you can't say who they
No.
are, but
No.
they've not been arrested. I mean, again
Yeah.
and again and again, you see this happen, that the cannon fodder of young people being dragged into crime
Yeah.
because they think it's glamorous, or they think, and it's very important, I think, that children should be educated very early on that this is
Yeah.
not glamorous.
Yeah. It's not. It's not a glamorous life. But the thing is, um, you get. You've got lots of different types of criminals, and you've got the ones that have been brought up around money, and you white collar criminals and stuff like
Hmm.
that, and your blue collar criminals, and then
Yeah.
what do you do when you get in prison? Right, you think, right, I either go in education or I go in work.
Yeah.
One pays pence, the other pays pence, so it's thing. But the thing is, you've got your people that have got an education that are getting all the places
Hmm.
in education. They're
Yeah.
getting their, whatever their degrees or whatever, and then
Yeah.
that's ticking boxes for the
Of
prison
course.
governor and for the prison. Whereas people
Looking at early
like
release, all
me,
sorts of things. Yeah.
yeah, people like me, like I was, you'd get in there. Um, you'd still be a box tick because you've gone in. I couldn't read all right when I went in there, so it's about ticking them boxes, helping
Hmm.
with that. But if you're
Yeah.
anywhere in between and you want to do it, you, it's difficult. You can't get on the course because most of them are taken up, so you end up working
No, no, it's absurd.
sweeping
The
the.
idea that somebody may want to get educated whilst in prison, and you know, there's a lot of time on your hands. Well, what better way to spend it than
Mm,
having something to study and books to read, and and quite often people go in there and they can't even really read. So,
no.
nobody should leave prison without having had, if they're in for any length of time, nobody should leave prison, like nobody should really leave school
Mm,
having not learned these things, but certainly prison, because they are prisoners. They've got no choice.
Mm,
You say, well, we're going to learn. You're going to learn to read. You're going to learn to read. You're going to learn to do maths, and and once you've learned to read, you're going to read some really interesting books. We're going to just put them in front. You've got to do it.
mm,
You know. And hopefully we're going to sit round, we're going to have discussions, we're going to try and show you, talk about society, talk about responsibility, talk about morals, talk about, how to better yourself. There's nothing, those sort of things. The great problem is, of course, that so many people in those situations, so many working class young men who find themselves in that situation, then realize the enormous injustice of the whole thing when governments are able to form £1 million contracts with people they went to school with,
mm-hmm.
and who then supply things that are not are substandard. When you've got the new health czar, his wife and family starting a medical supply company
Yeah.
and registering it, you sort of go, well, what's that for? Where did that come from? I mean, I'm not accusing anybody specifically, but I am implying that I don't trust the whole system of it. And I certainly don't trust the system of jobs for the boys and
No.
having gone to the right school and that sort of thing. And when you see that going on and you think to yourself, and these are sums of monies that the people who are actually being convicted of crimes, you £10,000, you have stolen £10,000, you should go to prison for a year for every thousand. That's my view, says the judge, and off you go. You go,
Mm-hmm.
what? People, you know, I don't know. I don't understand it. You know, my brother works for the Crown Prosecution Service, or did for many, many
Mm.
years. So, you find me in a difficult situation. I
Yeah.
can't completely
It's
criticize the whole
not.
system, but
It's a broken system because they don't want you to reform, because it's all the odds are stacked against you because you're a number, you're a head. So
mm.
they get money per head, um, and if that
What's
head count
absurd is
drops
the amount.
below so much, they have to get more people. You know.
Yeah, yeah. But what's absurd is that the cost of it to us, the people who pay for it, is colossal in comparison with if you had a proper education system and a proper training system within prisons, and people were not kept there when they don't need to be, and they were put
Mm,
on release, and whilst on release were given proper support and proper help and care, and provided with training, provided with the opportunity to get jobs, provided with accommodation, away from the situations where they found themselves in trouble before, so that they can see a prospect for themselves.
I think if you're very lucky, you might end up towards the end of your sentence in an open prison,
Hmm.
somewhere like Wetherby, where I grew up, and
Yeah,
you could walk out the door, and you could go across to the farm, and do your work on the farm, and then you'd
yeah.
come back. You'd get a key for your room, but you'd have to they'd call it a room. It wouldn't be a cell. They'd give you
So
so
yeah.
much, and it'll give you some of that humanity back. I think if you're lucky, you'll get there.
Hmm.
But that's not happening. There are people that are going in when they're kids on a long stretch, moderate to long stretch. They're coming out adults,
Yeah,
and they're not. They're given the very bare basics, and
yeah, yeah,
then you walk out of that big gate. All you see is road. That is all that is there.
yeah.
You're ill-equipped, ill-prepared. All you need is a postcode to get out.
Mm,
So they're putting you where they're ticking their boxes, and then you put straight back into the situation that you were in
mm.
when you got sent in there, and then it's that vicious cycle, and you're stuck in it, and then you end up being one of those old lags that's shuffling around the wing,
Yeah.
looking at the
Who,
floor, and
who,
you're
and
institutionalized.
completely institutionalized, and at the moment that they get any sort of sense of freedom, they don't. Their sense of freedom is to be in prison. That's when they feel relaxed and free. Outside is the hell for those people.
Mm,
I saw people like that, come out. And I remember my dad defending people and saying, why did you do this? You didn't need to do this. Particularly people who'd done long stretches and come out and had the money from the crime that they, you know what I mean? You know, people who'd done big crimes, taken large amounts of money, or and then had just kept quiet about it and done their 15 years, and then come out, got 20 years, done 15, finally come out. My dad would have defended them as a young man, and then there they are again 2 months later. And he says, "What are you doing? You had the money, didn't you? Had the money?" Because he sort of knew that they'd done it. I mean, they had initially said, "Yeah, all right. Well, can we do it? Can you help me? How can you bring down my sentence?" And he would say, "Well, the best thing to do is, his advice always: if you want to get your sentence reduced, plead guilty. If you did it, plead guilty. Don't waste the court's time with trying to pretend you didn't. Tell them I did it. I'm sorry. And that'll get a big chunk knocked off your sentence." And that was always his advice. So he was always saying to people, "Look, if you did it, tell me, and then we'll do the best we can." Not this idea that they have in sort of fiction, where a solicitor says, I don't want to know. You don't tell me anything. We're just going to work out a really good defense for you." It's bollocks. Solicitors don't do that. Barristers don't do that. No, they say, "Did you do it?"
Yeah.
And they'll question you more severely than the prosecution will, because they'll say,
of course they will, because it's their reputation.
Yeah.
You see, the thing is that there's a lot of people that are unjustly. This is an argument I had this afternoon, actually, on one of the groups, that there are people that are unjustly kept in prison. The IPP prison sentence, even though it's been outlawed now, it's not only is it unjust, it's immoral. There are people in there that went in for 6 months for stealing a bike. There's a guy in there for stealing a bike. He went in there for 6 months, and he's been in there for about 15 years now because of his mental health. And they've kept him there indefinitely. These indefinite sentences, 6 months, but you spend your life in there. That's not justice. That's
no. Well, it's sort of because they don't have any mental hospitals left anymore where people can be treated and hopefully cured. It is possible to make people better. Like it's possible to take someone who's, a young person who's committed a crime and persuade them this is not a good idea. If you want, look at the opportunities. It's a strange thing, isn't it? I've been a long-term advocate of a universal wage or a universal income. That I think that as a society it would make sense for us to make sure that nobody fell below a certain level, so that everybody should automatically, as a result of, this is a way to redistribute wealth, is we tax people and then we make sure that everybody has, all right, let's say 250 quid a week. Everybody gets it. And you don't means test it. You just give it to everybody. Now, it's up to people then, some people will see it as a tax rebate. Rich people, not much of a tax rebate, 250 quid a week, they don't care about that. These people on 5-6 grand a week, it's nothing, it's pocket money, so fine. Well, then in that case, give it back to charity or do something with it or whatever. But I still think that it's possible. And if you look at the incredibly complex system of, even with, universal credit, which was aimed to try and simplify the thing, it's unbelievably unwieldy and difficult and complicated. And to get it is really difficult. And to sign up for it and to get any sort of benefit is really difficult. And then you sort of go, well, I'm unemployed, but I'm also unemployed because I'm disabled or I've got some sort of injury or something. So I'm a sickness benefit. I need sickness benefit. And actually, this may be a long-term disability. So I'm going for another benefit. You're constantly trying to prove that you deserve the support. Whereas if we just gave everybody it. Now, the people who don't need it are going to spend it, probably, which helps everybody anyway, because we need money to move around. It bolsters the economy. I mean, they've been doing a thing called And people say, well, you can't give people, that's an enormous amount of money to be giving away every week. And you say, well, do you know how much it costs to run the benefit system? How much we spend running this system without actually giving anybody, before we've given anybody anything, we spend a fortune making this system work. Thousands of people employed in it, and also thousands of people employed checking whether people deserve it. Do you deserve this money? Are you trying to cheat us? And then at the same time, you've got that system, you've got all that money going into the system. Now we've been in order to get the economy moving, because the economy was so slow after the thing, we've been doing a thing through the banks called quantitative easing, which, and if you read about it, every now and again they say we put, 100, the banks put 50 billion pounds into the economy. They just released it. What they do is they give it to banks. Banks get it.
Right.
And it's then the bank's job to say, well, I've got this money. And so what we do is we put it into society through loans and things like that. But then people have to qualify for those, have to be worthy of those loans. And quite often the money doesn't get out to the places it needs to get out to. And I just think, why do we trust banks to distribute this money when, without a doubt, they royally fucked up 10 years ago?
Yeah.
And, the pandemic so far, according to the most recent estimates I've seen, has so far cost the economy something like 350 billion pounds. It's a lot of money. That's over the whole period of the pandemic. The banking crisis, I mean, I don't know if you remember, but the banking crisis, I think almost within a day of it happening, Northern Rock were given 100 billion pounds. 100 billion pounds.
Yeah.
Just like that. And they went under.
They did. They were bought out by Virgin.
Yep.
And Virgin have recently been bought out by Yorkshire and Peterborough.
And and overall, the banking crisis, within a matter of months, within a matter of weeks, in fact, cost the country 500 billion pounds. Just like that. Bang, give it to them. Just give it to them. We're never going to get it back. Let's just do it. Because otherwise the whole system falls apart. So that was done just like that, without a blink of the eye. We have to do it. Done by Labour Party. The Labour Party did it. Gordon Brown. And not like sort of, the great capitalist backers. No, they just knew that it had to be done. And what I don't understand is why they've sort of kept, they've had to wait and wait and wait and wait every time to say, are you going to help people during this crisis, the crisis that you've sort of in a way caused, or the crisis that you've insisted on? It's your law that says nobody can work.
It's
so you're not going to get, and why 80% of their income? Why not their income? You said you can't do that job. You're going to have to stop. You've got to stay at home. So the automatic follow-on from that is, if you say that to someone, I'm sorry, I'm the government, and I'm going to say to you, you can't do that job at the moment because we need you to go home and stay at home and stop.
Yeah.
So what we're going to do is we're going to pay your wages.
Yeah.
Until you can go back.
Yeah.
And that, surely, that's how simple it is. That's what they should have done in all these cases. And at the moment, saying, people are not obeying the rules properly, you go, well, these are people who are on a knife edge, a lot of them, who are in a real crisis. They've gone a year with not really earning much money. It's not like they're not me living in Tunbridge Wells, in a house that I own, having had a nice career. They're people who don't have savings. It's all gone. They've got nothing. It's gone, and they're looking at losing where they live, being evicted. The last round of the I don't know if you noticed, but just recently they said that the non-payment of rent for 6 months now does include the period of the pandemic.
Right.
When they first, before that, you couldn't be evicted if you hadn't paid your rent during the pandemic period, and they just changed that, and it's outrageous.
It's sadness. It's sadness.
It's terrible.
I know so many people that work in this industry, in the entertainment industry, so many actors and stuff like that that are really, really struggling to get by.
Of course.
And they've taken some, to be fair, they've taken some proper flack. Oh, well, go out and get a proper job. Well, this is a proper job. This is my job. You know, this is my job. I'm not able to go out and do this, you know.
Well, they're not saying go and get a proper job when they're all watching Bridgerton and watching all those actors working in that and working on all the crew that worked on it and all the people like that. And they're not the people who every night watch the telly and watch drama after drama after drama and all those things. All of them involving actors and people who work in this industry, writers, all those people. They will want those things to continue, you know. And if you may say, well, you know, all right, well, tell them to tell me what they've been in, and you go, well, some of them nothing. They haven't been in any of these big dramas. They haven't been in any of these big telly things. No. But who knows what they're going to, you know? Don't tell me you would like. Would you have liked Richard Wilson to have given up his job at the age of 40 because he'd never really been in a big television drama? He wasn't, you know. Perhaps we should bring a law in that if an actor doesn't really get any major success by the time they're 30, they have to stop and do a proper job. You know, it's absurd. And also, who are they to judge the value of being in Downton Abbey as opposed to being in a little play in a fringe theatre somewhere that somebody sees or a kid sees that changes their life?
Exactly. You know? The theatres are failing. You know, I live just outside Norwich, so I you know, Norwich is a very theatre town. You know, we've got the theatre, you know, the Theatre Royal. And
lots of them,
the Madame
and loads of little theatres, lovely.
Yeah. And they're failing because there's no money going into it. And then they said, "Oh, we'll put so much into the arts," but that didn't even skim the surface. So
no, that's also just for the buildings. When you know, they think what they're just going to reopen and then people will come out of the woodwork. Well, you know, I mean, you know, for some actors, it's okay. We can carry on. A lot of actors have carried on. You know, there has been work, and there are many things you can do. I mean, you know, I sit here with my microphone in front of me, and you know, I can use my voice to make a living, and I do.
Yeah.
You know, but nowhere near as much. You know, and some people more. You know, as with all these things, some people have actually benefited from it. You know, their life has improved, but that's the minority. And it's an absurd idea to say, you know, the arts also just sort of go, well, we're not going to back the arts because it's, you know, they should be able to look after themselves. You know, if you're going to make money, make money. If you can't, bad luck. The arts is an enormous contributor to the exchequer. Enormous. I mean, you know, funding of the arts is about 10% of what they get back in revenue.
Yeah.
So any money that you put into the arts pays you back tenfold.
Yeah.
And you may not directly from that job, you may be, you know, funding some little fringe play somewhere that people are putting on, and you sort of go, well, that didn't make any money at all, did it? And you go, no, but I know lots of people who did those little fringe plays. I did those little fringe plays, but I've also then been in things where I've paid people a lot of tax, and the revenue that the thing is made from being on television, and from it's paid back for that little bit of investment they made in my career when I was, you know, 20. It's made it back, you know, 100 times.
See, the thing is, for me, and you know, the arts is it's a cathartic thing for me. You know, I've been very, over the past 6.5 years since I've been sober, I've been very blessed in the fact that I've got to go and work on a couple you know, on a couple of Hollywood films and a TV series, and you know, I've got to speak to people from all over the world, and you know, I've got to do this. It's cathartic. It's a part of my recovery, and it's big part of my life. And I know that there are people whom are very dear to me that feel the same, you know, who actually do work fully in the arts because it's their calling, it's their need, and they're getting no help, and You know, they're failing, and you know they've got kids that go to school, and then you know you've got the government that have said, "Oh well, you know, we'll do the school dinners," and they're inadequate.
Yeah, terrible.
You know, we're very lucky at my little boy's school. You know, it's quite good. It's quite a good.
Yeah.
It's quite a good little hamper.
The thing is that people forget is that the majority of actors, and there are a lot of actors in the world, and the majority of them earn very poorly. I mean, the amount of money you earn as an actor, generally, you get by. You know, a lot of actors supplement their being an actor by doing other work as well. Most actors will take on some other form of job, even if it's, you know, I need to do a bit of writing or something. Even if it's within the creative sphere, you will very few actors survive entirely on just acting, because it's just not paid well enough. Nearly all the work you do, I mean, even being in a play in the West End, there are lots of people doing plays in the West End who are getting, you know, and they're fantastically skillful. They may be dancing in the chorus, singing. They've done loads of training. They're amazingly skillful. When you think of all the young people in the world, in the country particularly, who would give their right arm to be performing in the West End, to be in Les Mis or something, and the people who are actually in it, you know, they're a tiny little group of people, and they may be getting £600-700 a week. You know, now you sort of go, I wouldn't mind £600-700 a week. That's very nice, thank you. But it's not really. It's not really. You know, they've got to do a year in Les Mis, £600-700 a week. So that's £30,000 a year for performing in the West End in one of the most successful musicals. And you're out there every night doing that, and then at the end of the year, you stop, and there's no guarantee you've got another job. You might not get another job for 6 months, and you've got to survive on the fact that last year you earned £30,000.
Yeah,
it's not. You know, if you think actors are all millionaires, you're wrong. Think again.
No.
Most of them are most of them are poor. Most actors are poor. They always have been, and they always will be, because people don't pay what I think the arts are worth. You know,
you don't become an actor for money anyway.
It's only when you get to the very top of it, you get anywhere near the top, you know, then you can start earning good money, and then you can, you know, I mean, if you get to the top, you will earn extremely good money.
I mean, I know people that are earning a good whack doing supporting roles, supporting actors. You know, and they're earning what, £150 a day. If it's a speaking role, £200. You know, if we've got some.
So
lines,
they might get you know, they might have the lucky get £1,000 a week. They got to work every day.
Might get 3-4 days, 5 days, 6 days, 7 days, and then that's it. Then they've got to find the next film, and you've then got all the other people that are fighting for that, and it's just, you know, unless that is all you do, unless you've got a generic face, a generic body, and you're just going to go in for those generic roles.
Yeah. So in those situations, if you've been doing it, say, for 10 years, you've not had a great opportunity. You're establishing yourself. You're doing stuff that you hope people will notice, that might open up a bigger market for you and earn you more money. You have no real opportunity to then, to save money, to put money aside, to invest in anything. You're getting by. Everything you earn, you need to pay your rent, because often you need to be in the big conurbations. You need to be right in there so you can get to these places easily. So you've either got to live right in the middle of London, you know. So it's really tough. You know, nearly all the money you're earning is going on rent. You know, it's really tough. And then suddenly, nothing, because you don't do television, you don't do voiceovers. You know, your agent doesn't ring you up and say, can you do a voiceover down the line? You know, it's £3,000. You go, yeah, okay. The only way they earn the money is by going and working in the theatre every day and doing long hours of rehearsals, performing in the evening, for very little money. And suddenly that's gone. It just can't happen at all. And try taking that away from people for a year, and it's all very well going to do a proper job. What are they going to do? Become a waiter? There's no restaurants open. There's no fucking restaurants.
Exactly.
Crazy.
I mean, you've got a few that are doing, like, you've got we watched the Panto live at Christmas with the kids.
Yeah.
I think entertainment now,
But those
it's
people would have
make or
been,
break.
they wouldn't have
We're
been
in
earning
a,
much for that.
well,
The
no,
Panto life,
but I think we're now in a plateau where we are going to have to, because I think with COVID we're going to go up and down for a good couple of years at
Yeah.
least.
Yeah.
I reckon this is set until at least 23, 24, 25. So,
Well, it may be
and
with us for, it may
entertainment,
be with us for good. It
yeah,
may be with us for good. That
exactly.
until we absolutely get to the point where we can, where we know the vaccine. I mean, where you develop a vaccine like the vaccine for measles or something, that
Hmm.
actually, you should be able to eradicate it if you do it properly, and everybody gets vaccinated. But
But nothing's
they
been
still
done
happen.
properly up to
They
now,
still
has
happen.
it? So,
No,
you know,
no.
I think entertainment, it has changed. There are a lot more people like me that are coming up, trying to come up through the ranks. There's some very good.
It's always been a very egalitarian system. The whole
Yeah.
thing, acting, it's always been for everybody. If you want to do it and you love it, there's no. It's not a class thing. Acting. That's what I love about it. It's about your passion and your dedication
Mm,
and your willingness to do it, and then in the end, a bit your talent.
yeah.
But mostly, it's about, do you love this thing? Are you
Yeah.
willing to come in and work together? And
Yeah.
and will you work with people so that in a way it is the most crucial thing, I think, the ability to work with other people. And I,
Mm,
I remember as a very young actor, the first play I did, I just couldn't, it came home to me so strongly, the sense of, I can't think of another profession where me, as the first time in a play, first professional play. So this was, because I did review and did sketches and things, it was a good 3 or 4 years into my career. I'd already done lots of things by then, but I hadn't done a
mm,
play. And I did a play and I played the lead in it. It was Tom Jones. I played Tom Jones. And in this play were lots of older actors that I knew from the telly. I'd seen
mm,
them in loads of things. I went, you're in that and you're in this. I knew all these actors very well.
mm.
And on the first day of rehearsal, we stood up and they all went, so what do you want to do in this scene, Mike? What you're the lead role. Where do you want to go? How do you
Yeah.
want to say it? They deferred to me. They gave
Mm.
me the decision. You know, imagine that in banking. Somebody joins. But it might not be a
Yeah.
bad idea to say to the person who's just joined, how do you think we should do this banking thing?
Mm,
Because what you just all do it the same and it's all hierarchy and you work your
mm.
way up. Nothing changes. You never get any innovation. Whereas
Yeah.
opening up to somebody who's completely naive, I remember saying things people going, oh, "That's a good idea. Yeah, yeah. Should we do it? We'll do that. That's great. Yeah, let's try that."
Yeah.
And it was because they'd never come across it before. Because I didn't know what everybody did. I didn't know how to do it.
Mm.
I was just making it up.
I
But
think
that's
that's
an
what most
amazing
people
sort
have
of.
done.
But it's
Um,
an amazing thing to have that opportunity to in a way
yeah.
to be treated as the most important person in it simply because I had more lines than anybody else.
Yeah. It's like,
Yeah.
yeah, I have found that there are some elitists, and there are some there is a little bit of snobbery with some actors that are like, oh, that they were like, um, National Youth Theatre, and then went
Yeah,
and did
no,
his training.
RADA.
I have a very little training. I had a bit of training when I was a kid in the National Youth Theatre, a few
Yeah.
drama groups. I was more interested in smoking weed at the back of the school shed, but I've sort of gone up, or worked pretty much every role.
Yeah.
Volunteered, and I've gone, yeah, I'll do this. Um, I think the making of me was when I was asked to go and speak to a director called Joanna Hogg, for the film The Souvenir, and
Hmm.
because of my life, what I've been through.
Mm.
I'm very honest about it on Facebook. I'm very honest about it with my followers, and
Yeah.
I was asked to go and speak about being being an addict and you know what it's like. And then I got to work with Tom Burke and help him with his you know thing. And it's the most surreal thing, I think, because I gave up a long time ago trying to become an actor, and then when I gave up, I got I got asked then to go on the set, and you know I got to a couple of lines in a you know an A24 film, and that was great. But that's then caused people to go, well, what have you done to deserve that? You know, that fell into your hands. You know, we've worked our lives, and it's like, well, you know, you can't be like that. It's a sad fact that you know people will always be jealous of any sort of success.
Yeah, I mean, generally, my experience is that I mean, I know very few actors who are that sort of self-centered. You know, actually, quite often the most successful ones, you know, are you need a ruthless edge. You need to concentrate on yourself. Quite often, you'll be in a play, and everybody who comes to see it says, "God, that bloke, he's brilliant, isn't he?" And you know that everybody in the play hates that person.
Mm-hmm.
Because they never give a moment's thought to what anybody else is doing on stage. They don't give a damn about what you do. It's all about them. And it's not how most actors work, but it seems to work for audiences, I have to say, you know. So, you know, maybe the lesson you should say to young people is absolutely go out there, cut throats, just kill them all off, get them out of the way, stamp on people, you know, just destroy their careers, do anything you can to beat them. Because you know it's about you getting noticed, so make sure people notice you. Really, you know, maybe that's the advice. That's what drama schools should be teaching them, rather than, you know, no, it's a very collaborative art, and we all work together, and everybody's as important as everybody else. And you sort of go, no, you want to really be a success in this, then every time you see anybody doing anything good, fuck it up for them, you know.
It certainly measures the size of your balls, because it's rejection. You know, you have to learn to take rejection.
Yeah.
You know, with writing.
Yeah, either that or just
you
or
have to do
you're
that.
blindly egotistical. I don't know, one or the other. You're either you've got really big balls, or you're just astonishingly self-centered. You know, people can criticize you or seem to reject you endlessly. So go, no, you're not the person we want in this play. And all you ever think is, well, they're wrong. They're wrong because I'm brilliant.
Yes.
You know, so I mean, I don't know. Maybe actors are, you know, the ones who really survive, like me, are the ones who just think, nah, I'm brilliant. I'm fine. I can do anything. You know, I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. You know, I mean, I just feel that I've been fortunate. I've just happened to have worked with really good people. I've met really good people. I've sort of enjoyed it. I've enjoyed nearly all of it. Every now and again, you know, you think to yourself, oh God, you know, when you've got to sit down and learn pages and pages of stuff about some toilet fluid, which you're doing for a training film because you need the money. You know, got to learn, and they're all very serious about it. And you think to yourself, oh, for God's sake, it's just a computer system. Who gives a toss, you know? Anyway, those things. But then, you know, I mean, far be it from me to complain about it, because there are people who do work in those industries all the time and have to, I'm sure, I feel, pretend that they love it. You know, yeah, no, I did nothing I like more than accountancy. You know, it's got to be the thing that keeps me going through the day. The fact that I know I'm going to add up some more figures at the end of it. You sort of go, okay, maybe that's true. Maybe I'm sure it is true for some people. But are they delusional? That's my question. I don't know.
I mean, I think in the past few years, for me, what I've had to learn is that um, I'm mainly a writer. I've done some acting and stuff like that, but I love to write. Ever since I learned to write at the age of 2021,
Yeah.
in in HMP Leeds, it was, I always said I'd be dangerous, and then didn't really have the guts to go out there and write anything. So I
Yeah.
spent my life as a dreamer. And then people saying you'd never do this, you'll never do this, you'll never do this. You know, growing up through the special school system, you'll never do this, you'll never do this. You're lucky
No.
if you'll get a job as a cleaner and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And then once I stepped out of that comfort zone and wrote my first book, and then probably sold about 20 copies, and then people are like, nah. And then
What
so
was the
I
point of
then,
that? Yeah.
yeah, but to
And you
me,
go,
that
well,
was a massive
of
thing.
course, the point is I
And
wrote it.
yeah, and
I
then the
bloody wrote
second
the thing.
book,
It was published, you know. Yeah.
it was published, yeah. And then the second book, I spent 6 months talking to escapees of human trafficking, and that sort of changed my heart. And then, I did that, and then I had a breakdown, and then breakdown, suffer with mental health, and
Yeah.
then, my own ability started coming into question. You question yourself, you self-sabotage, and then I spent 18 months doing a book with somebody else while really struggling. But I think during this lockdown now,
Yeah.
um, I'm dealing with it better because I've started these interviews and these videos. People are watching them. It's helped me with my confidence.
Yeah.
It's helping me with my speaking. I'm not really very confident in that.
You
And
don't
people
appear
are
that
like,
way.
well, we'll help you. You know,
Yeah.
one thing that drugs takes away, is that it takes away it. When you're on the drugs, it makes you a different person. And I'm totally polar opposite to what I was then.
Yeah.
But so this confident man,
I've seen enough people taking drugs over the time
yeah,
to know that to be true. I mean, and many
this,
of them, absolutely getting by and carrying on, in fact, indeed being successful, but heavily reliant on drugs. And I
yeah,
know that fact that people, they're not the people that they are when they're not on it. I
exactly,
mean, I've had lots of people. My podcast that I do, I spoke to an old friend of mine who I'm sure he won't mind me mentioning this because he's very open about it. A man called Jimmy Mulville, and he runs, in fact, he owns a company called Hat-Trick Productions.
yeah,
And Hat-Trick Productions are an enormous production company.
yeah, yeah,
They do Have I Got News for You and loads of other things, but it's
yeah,
his company, and he said he started it. He's built it into this, you know, £300 million
mm,
company doing astonishing films, television, all sorts of things all over the place.
mm,
And he was the most dreadful uh, example of a drug addict. He got by. He sort of you know he sort of got away with it for a long time because the cocaine made him sort of fairly manic, and in fact that's what he was selling. He was selling these sort of I'm just a bit crazy, and it worked as a character
mm,
for a while, but you know. It, he was completely untrustworthy.
mm,
You just couldn't rely on anything he said because he couldn't really remember what he was doing, and it was his 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 whole raison d'être was getting some more drugs. But he's the most brilliant man now, and I mean I'm sure he always. I think the reason we all stuck with him and we all continue to like him was that he always was. He always
mm,
was the most brilliant man. He always was. You knew that he had an enormous heart. You knew that he'd been through things and suffered and cared. And it was only the drugs that made him appear to not care.
mm,
You know? So yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
yeah,
And it's the problem is that whilst you're doing those things, you're convinced that they're helping. That
yeah.
you need them to be you.
Well, yeah, because you see, for me, I mean, it's all in the first book, you know, and I've been quite vocal about it. I'm adopted, so
Mm,
and I love my parents dearly.
yeah.
I love them dearly. We don't always see eye to eye, but I do. I love them very, very dearly. However, the sort of making and breaking of me was on my 8th birthday. After having a day of, they bought me a wigwam that was in the garden, and what mothers are like, Yorkshire mothers are like in the 80s. So you'd have this plateau of cakes and fizzy pop and,
Yeah.
friends. And then, after all that, this, child that didn't really speak to too many people was sat on his mum's knee and told that he was loved very, very much. But I'm not your mum. And
Right.
the man there that's reading the paper is not your dad, and you've got a real mum somewhere, you've got a real family somewhere, but she couldn't look after you. So
No.
and I know they had to do that. It was part of the terms of them adopting me.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah. When
but
you do it and how you do it, it's
exactly,
never really properly dealt with, is it?
no, and that brought in for me a massive fear of rejection, and that's what I lived with my whole life, and that was the catalyst for all of the bad behavior. It was a catalyst for all of the lies, because if I wasn't this person that I thought I was, I could be anybody. So I could mimic people.
Yeah.
Physically and verbally. I could follow suit, and that came easy to me. What didn't come easy was the reading and writing and stuff like that.
Hmm.
And then I got bullied really, really badly at school, to the point where I
Yeah.
was put in hospital. And then that's when I decided that I was going to become someone else. And I spent years pretending to be somebody, pretending to be this weak and feeble little man, when in fact I
Mm.
was 13 miles down the road in Leeds at the weekend, uh, uh, underneath in the cellars of pubs, um, knocking 10 barrels of crap out of someone, or getting the 10 barrels of crap knocked out of me for a bit of
Yeah.
cash.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
or I was working with a small hustling firm, hustling, on long cons. I was all right at accents, and I, I would be anybody rather than who I was, and
Yeah.
and that's
But it's
then.
easy in those circumstances, isn't it, to sort of go, well, do you know what? I mean, if if somebody didn't want me as a child, there must be something wrong with me. Well, I'll show you what's wrong with me. I'll
Mm,
demonstrate why I was. I mean,
mm,
this I'll make it clear to everybody why I was rejected.
yeah,
You know, because
yeah,
I'll make everybody reject me.
yeah, and
Easy.
that's what I did. That's what, and the drugs were a way of keeping those 10,000 thoughts that went through my head, because there was no such thing as dyslexia when I was a kid. There was no such thing
No,
as ADHD or ADD or anything like that. I was
no, no.
just a troubled child, so I was sent to a troubled child school.
Yeah,
In my adulthood, I met my real mum.
yeah. He won't concentrate. He just won't
No,
concentrate. Yeah, yeah.
I love my real mum to bits. Lost her a few years ago, to cancer.
Hmm.
But
Did you talk to your
yeah,
real mum about why?
yeah, I mean, she was mentally ill, and back in
Yeah.
the 70s, she'd come down from Scotland. She'd just lost her father died in police police custody outside a pub in Glasgow.
Hmm.
Had a heart attack and died. But she'd come up here, and I think I was 6 months old when I was brought here.
Yeah.
And she had mental health issues, and she really struggled. I know she really struggled. um I did speak to her about it. She wasn't one to really open up about that, but
No.
I loved her to bits. I was I'm not the easiest person to communicate with. I went through you know where I was quite closed, and I wasn't the greatest communicator. And with the family that brought me up, my mum and dad that brought me up, I didn't pick up the phone, and I didn't speak to them for years. They didn't pick up the
Mm.
phone to me, and I was stubborn. And the same with my real mum. And by the time I actually did get to speak to her, it was only a few months before I got the phone call saying mum's in hospital on the Easter Friday, and then on the Sunday, I got the phone call saying that we'd lost her. So you know, again, that was loss. And I struggle with loss and grief, and everybody that I'd ever been close to, I struggled with. And then, you
Yeah.
know, my marriage ended. I ended up homeless and blah blah blah. You know, this was before I lost my mum, but you know,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
all these things are these things that have sort of made me. And I've got friends that don't understand why I'm so open, and you know, I'll talk about it because I want to educate. There is a need to educate. There is a need for more men
Well, I can
like me.
absolutely understand that. I mean, you know, there will be, you know, it's important. If you don't talk about these things, then actually there'll be other people in the same situation as you found yourself in. There'll be young people out there. You know, we are lucky, I think, that we live in a much more communicative world,
Mm,
where in fact, if you have a problem, you can tend to find it. Of course, there's the counterbalance of that, in as much as if you feel that you want, you know, if you're sort of tempted by something which is clearly not good for you, or is um is is just a lie, you know,
mm,
there you'll always find somebody who will continue to tell you that lie, you know. So I mean, the use of this system and the whole process of communicating with people and passing things on and everything, we have to be careful with it, you know.
mm.
But at the same time, I can completely understand that it's important that young people, you know, they might look this up, find this interview, and go, "Uh, "That's me," and
Exactly.
avoid the pain that you've had, you know. And
Yeah,
if that happens once, if you do that once in your life,
and that is my that's my aim. You know,
yeah,
it's like I suppose that you know if just affecting that one person, there's so many. The mental health system for men, especially in this country,
mm,
is piss poor. I'm sorry, but it is. That
hmm,
it's not fit for purpose. There's so much pressure on men like us to keep quiet about it. To you know, I grew up with I love my dad to bits, but he was like, you provide for your family, you do this, you do this, you do this, you do
yeah,
this.
yeah, yeah.
You don't talk, you don't cry, you don't do this,
Stop
and
whinging, son. Yeah.
yeah, so it's that sort of um, toxic masculinity that
Hmm.
we are then breeding.
Yeah.
And then when it comes to mental health, there's so many men my age. You know, I'm 43 years old. That there are men my age that are ill-equipped to deal with that because they don't know how to cry. They don't know how to deal with these situations. They don't know how to speak to people, and
No.
that's what we need to do. I think as well. You know, I've spoken
Certainly
to a
not.
lot of
Certainly
people.
don't know how to ask for help,
No,
which is sort of the key to it. I think to sort
yeah,
of to realize that you need help and to ask for it. You know, is always the problem. You know, I mean, I'm absolutely one of those people who've gone through life. I have the ability to sort of deflect things. I just
mm,
push them aside, and not. I don't want any of that. Just push it aside.
mm,
And I get on. I've got on fine doing that. But there are many things that certainly my wife has had to sort out in me. You
mm,
know, because there are parts of your life that you don't remember. My son was bullied at school and dropped out of school. Luckily, we were in a system where, you know, we were of an age and in a time when we listened to him
mm,
rather than going, well, he's just causing trouble. We
yeah,
let him stay at home. We taught him at home
mm,
because we realized it was necessary. He just
mm,
couldn't go in. He found the whole thing awful. Like you say, he got hospitalized. Well, before he got to that point, he said, I'm not going there anymore.
mm,
I'm not putting up with it. So yeah, but you know, in a different age, we would have royally fucked him up, you know.
yeah,
But luckily, we didn't, and it would have, but luckily, it didn't, you know.
mm,
So you know, and but it made me completely reassess my own school days. If anybody before then had said to me, "How was school for you?" If I was doing an interview and you'd said to me, "How was school for you?" I would have gone, "It's great." it's great. I was fine at school. I loved school. Yeah, it's good. I was quite popular. I was in the rugby team. I was in the football team. I also did drama. Teachers liked me. I was quite good academically. So yeah, it's great. And then once my son started saying it's really frightening, I went, shit, yeah, it is really.
Mm.
I mean, I do not remember going to school a day. Certainly once. I don't really remember primary school, although I remember incidents at primary school, and they were
Mm.
generally ones where things were really unfair and unjust. The things that happened, and you knew they were, and there's nothing you could do about them. So you were
Mm.
powerless. I know that much. But as far as going to secondary school was concerned, uh, I do not remember ever waking up or ever going to bed on a Sunday night and not being full of fear, being thinking, oh, for God's sake, everything about it was frightening.
Mm.
And I was at a school where everybody was hit all the time. We were all beaten all the
Mm.
time, all day long. Everywhere you went, people were hitting you.
Yeah.
And there was, and bullies were just, well, stand up for yourself.
Mm.
Somebody sort of stand up for yourself, boy.
Yeah.
Don't expect me to do anything about it. But
Yeah.
sir, there's a crowd of them. Well, it's right. Take a beating. Be a man.
Mm.
Really weird when I look back on it. And my son's own problems made me reanalyze my own youth, my own childhood. And I remember, you know, and then when I started talking to my wife about these things, she went, "Oh my God, that's awful. That is really, really, oh my God, that happened." Yeah, happened all the
Mm.
time. She's sort of taken aback with it. Not only that, I mean, I have memories of my parents were brought up by Victorians, and had very Victorian attitudes to
Mm.
childhood and to the way you were. That misbehavior required smacking and hitting and thrashing sometimes. And if it was really bad, my mother would say, "Right, your father's going to beat you. You're gonna
Mm.
get a good thrashing." And I remember being woken up by my dad. So I must have been, and this was in London, so I was under 8. So, but I would imagine I was 5 or 6, and I'd done something wrong. And by the time he woke me up, I had no idea what it was, and he'd just come back from work, so I hadn't seen him. So, of course, my
Mm.
reaction to my father waking me up is, "Oh, it's my dad. Hi, Dad. Hi, Dad. All right. You've got to get out of bed." I got out of bed, pulled down your pajama bottoms, bend over, and then he hit me with his belt.
Mm.
And you sort of go, and I have vivid memories of it. And I remember the reason I remember it is because my father was crying, and I'd not seen him cry before then. And so clearly the whole thing is completely screwed. All of it is screwed. Their attitude to how you admonish children, that in fact
Mhm.
it was a delayed punishment, would have any effect on a 5-year-old. I could not even remember the thing I'd done. So
Mm.
I'm being beaten by a man I love who's crying because he's
Mm.
having to do it. It's
Yeah.
all crazy, isn't it? So,
It
you know,
is.
I sort of, in my 60s, I come from an age where the world really was mad. We lived in a mad world.
I think it's going back there, to be honest.
I sadly think it is. I mean, I hope in all areas I have hope and then desperation in
Hmm.
the area of. I look at my profession, for example, our profession, the profession of making entertaining people. And I look at things like the new series that everybody's talking about on Netflix, Bridgerton. Is it called Bridgerton? Yes, it is.
I've not watched it.
Or Egerton, or one of those things, or Somethington. It's a new big thing on Netflix. They've spent a fortune on it. It's got a brilliant cast. I've seen it. To a large extent, it's an excuse for very beautiful young people with marvelously gorgeous bodies to take their
Yes.
clothes off and roll around on beds together, and
Yeah.
it's fine. It's fine. I have to say, I got a bit bored with it, but the storyline and the acting in it, very,
Mm.
very good, really good. And the whole thing, I think they could have done it in half the number of episodes, but
Yeah.
I really liked it, and
Mm.
it's beautiful. It's beautifully done, but it is completely colorblind casting. And I have to say, and that's been a long time coming. And it seems to be a lot of people in the profession have taken a long time to grasp what it is, but there is no regard paid to anybody's colour. And it's a real step forward. And the audience watching it also are not going, but he's a duke in the 18th century. He wouldn't be black.
Mm-hmm.
They're not doing it. They're watching this thing, watching this entertainment. They don't give a damn. And that is a great step forward.
That's really good.
It is. And we, as an organization, we are leading this attitude. We are leading this. You should not notice people's color because it's irrelevant. Anyway, we're all actors. We're just pretending. So what the fuck, who cares what my color of skin is?
Exactly.
So, if I'm black, I can play the King of England. Who gives a damn? As long as I play it well.
Exactly.
I can be Hamlet. Who cares? And those things have been led, I think, by the acting profession. A great thing that we've done. And yet we're in a time where over the last year people have had to declare Black Lives Matter. People have been so on one side you see real advance, and on the other side you see things deteriorating into almost some sort of mad deep south of America, come here, boy, and you just think, what the fuck is going on? Who would ever think that was a reasonable attitude to have?
Well, exactly.
That the color of someone's skin makes a difference.
Exactly. I mean, I tend to get typecast, to be honest, as well, because I look a certain way. And up until a few years ago, I was like 9-10 stone. I'm
really?
Virgin on 17 stone now, but it was me and a lovely guy called Stephen Higgins, a Rastafarian, and we would get 3 times now. We've worked on the same things, and we've been both cast as the dealer and the the addict and stuff like that. And it's because
whereas I next time you get a casting like that, I'll send it to you. My wife is a doctor of biochemistry. She's a PhD in biochemistry. She hasn't studied it for a long time now, but she is still doctor. And one of the professors who worked at her university was, you've never seen so many piercings, you've never seen so many tattoos, and he looked like he was a real biker, and he was a brilliant man, and real at the forefront of his work, and incredibly bright. So the next time you go for a casting like that, this is how this happens. This is what needs to happen. And we can lead it. We can lead this. We are leading it in the acting profession. We are absolutely changing the way people view the world by saying we are not going to take any notice of it. So suddenly, you look at Doctor Who, all these programs, really all the top parts, not the top parts, but people in power are women. We're casting women, we're casting people of color in those parts. We're making professors black. We make, because they are.
Of course,
not because, and we're completely ignoring this, but we are not ignoring it when it comes to casting. We are deliberately going, we need to spread this out.
Inclusion.
We must never assume that a professor, okay, right, so the part is Professor Johnson. So we then go, okay, right, so it'll be me. I'll get it. I'll get the part because I look like, this is how Professor Johnson looks. Look, he's my age. He's got, and he talks in a posh accent. No, fuck it. No, you don't. You make Professor Johnson a 35-year-old Indian woman because they are. It's only our own bias that immediately makes our brains jump that way. And you can retrain those thoughts. You can make people realize that the world is not the way you think it is.
Exactly. There's a massive argument at the minute about inclusion in film and television. I think it was Piers Morgan that started it off about should gay people play gay people and straight people play straight people, and
I mean, it's a difficult question. It's a difficult question. I can understand why gay people would be annoyed with straight people playing gay people.
But are
But
they really?
I mean, I'm not sure. I think we're actors, and you should be able to,
Hmm.
if I act somebody. Then again, I've spoken recently to James Moore, the actor James Moore, who's
Hmm.
in, who has cerebral palsy, and he says that he finds it objectionable, the idea of, he finds it really, nobody in his position is ever going to get a chance if all the straight actors end up cripping up, as he calls it.
Hmm.
And you sort of go, yeah, I can see that argument, yeah. And in the end, I think in order to get it fair, to make it fair, there has to be a certain amount of the discrimination we've always had, which has been the other way.
Yeah.
We have to reverse it. We have to
Yeah.
turn it round, and we have to deliberately
Yeah.
go, okay, we're going to turn this on its head.
Hmm.
So if somebody, thank you, Daniel Day-Lewis, brilliant
Yeah.
performance, but you're never doing My Left Foot again.
Yeah.
We're going to find an actor who is already in that position to play this person who can't talk, and virtue. We're going to find a person who is, and we're going to cast them, and that's what we're going to do. It's
Yeah. I mean,
it's difficult. It's very
it,
difficult, but I think positive discrimination is an area that we have to look at.
yeah. I mean, it is. But at the end of the day, I mean, it all went through. It went when what was it, The Theory of Everything, and Eddie Redmayne played Hawking,
Mm,
and everybody, they could have given that to a real disabled actor. Well, if you're going to do that, that disabled actor would need at least to be at a certain level.
yeah, because
It,
I
you
mean, the
know,
problem is if you're showing someone's development over a period of time, you
exactly,
need them to begin with to not be disabled. You can't give
exactly,
it to a disabled actor. It's very difficult.
exactly,
I can see that. Yeah, I can see that.
exactly. And I understand, about that, and there are so many
Or
disabled
you get
actors
two
that
actors
fight to
to
be
play it.
seen.
You get two actors to play it.
Yeah, we're all fighting
You
to be
get
seen at the
an
end of the
able-bodied
day.
actor to play. It's possible. There are ways around these things. There are ways to do it. And
Yeah,
if the audience says, you know, isn't ready to accept it, you sort of have to go, well, you're going to have to accept it because this is the way it is.
it's changing. It is rapidly changing, and people might not like
You
it.
know, no,
What is
I
it?
did a play at the RSC, and one of the actors in it, one of the actors was black, there always is now, because they're part of society, and there are a lot of black actors, and they're
Mm,
really good,
hmm.
and so they got the part. And to begin with, we went around and spoke to the audience before we started. We would chat to the audience and say we're going to do a play, and presented ourselves as a company about to do a play,
Mm.
and it was a sort of a part of the whole build up to it. I remember talking to an old lady at the Royal Shakespeare Company and saying, "So why is that black man playing that?" And I went, "Well, because he's an actor." And she said, "Yeah, I know. Well, I suppose it's all right in this," she said, "but I did see a production of Othello where both Iago and Othello were both black." She said it was ridiculous. And I said, "Why is that ridiculous? What's She said, "Because it's about the difference in things." I said, "Well, that's your interpretation of it, or you could still see that even if, I mean, why couldn't both of them be white? Would you object to that?" And in the end, it
Exactly.
turned out that the real objection was, and this is really offensive, and I had to bite my lip and turn away because we were just about to do a performance for this woman. She said, "Well, the problem is, you can't tell them apart." And if it had been down to me, I would have ejected her from the theatre on
Mm.
that basis. But I just went, "Oh God!" And I think people get to a certain age, it's almost impossible to change their mind. It's so ingrained in everything they've ever heard.
Yeah, because it was I mean, what would I be? Generation X, I suppose.
Hmm.
And so I grew up with people like Alf Garnett on television.
Yeah,
Um, you know,
love thy
um,
neighbour.
yeah, Love Thy Neighbor.
Yeah, on the
You know,
buses, everybody taking the mickey out of.
yeah,
Yeah,
and this, um, Bernard Manning and Jim Davison and Stan.
And even recently, I mean, I know I'm a bit taken aback. I may have to look at it again, but I recently saw somebody saying, anybody watched Only Fools and Horses recently? It's full of jokes about black. And I said, it's not, is it? I don't remember that in it. But they seem to think it was. They seem to think it was full of, sexist, racist. I don't believe that's true, actually, because I knew
No,
John
I mean,
Sullivan, and
I think there are some sort of on the nose sexist remarks and some on the nose, slightly edging
probably,
towards homophobia.
yeah.
However, with the racism, yeah, it was there, but it was because I'm not defending it, but
No, I think it's worth
going back to
defending it.
saying
You've
you're
got to look. You've got to
Victorian.
look at that society, that group of people. There is a,
Yes.
there is a. That one of the friends of them, they all gather together in the pub. One of their friends is black, and they don't ever make any
Yeah.
real
You say,
comment on that.
yeah. I mean, I can't say that I've noticed any sort of
No.
maybe stereotypes.
Yeah.
But then again, there's David Jason plays a stereotype, and
Yeah. And in fact, nearly
Wes
always the
Lindos
humour
does,
is
and
nearly always the humour is knocking themselves, isn't it?
so, but I can
Okay.
understand with the the sexism and stuff like that, but not the rest. Whereas things like Love Thy Neighbour, Alf Garnett, Jim Davison, the Liverpool
What
comedian
was the one
Stan,
that
whatever
Leonard
his
Rossiter
name is.
did? Where he was Rigby and all that. So Leonard Rossiter did that.
Yeah,
Very funny series, but
overtly racist.
yeah.
But
Racist
that was
elements of it.
because I mean my dad is 83, 84 now. And so he my granddad was probably born 1901, 1902. So it is that sort of Victorian still mentality, and especially the Yorkshire mentality, the Northern mentality, how it was.
Well, and the thing you don't know, the thing that frightens you. I mean,
in
my
the 80s,
dad
we
was
didn't
born in
see
my
it.
dad was born in 1922. 1922, my dad was born, and that's my dad. It's a long time ago. Just me, him, 1922. Bloody hell! Just after the First World War, and so my mother was brought up in southeast London, in the docks. She, even to her dying day, my wife's lineage is Jewish, and my mother was almost unable to say the word Jew or Jewish without slightly instilling it with some sort of comment. She didn't make the comment, but the way she said the word implied it. She just couldn't get it out, train it out of her head, couldn't train it out of her vocabulary, because that's what she'd been brought up, as a Catholic, to somewhat fear Jewish people. And this is a person who, you would think, surely, having developed that view at the same time as it was being developed in other parts of Europe and led to appalling, untold misery, that she would have learned from that, but she never did see the connection. It's strange, isn't it?
It is, and I suppose it's inherent in a certain generation, and certain generations won't listen, and it's down to probably more like my generation and my kids' generation and my grandkids' generation.
But I grew up I was born into a generation. I was born into a time when racism was absolutely, I mean, it was what, homophobia, sexism, and racism were the cornerstones of comedy. All jokes were based on that.
Yeah.
Men about my wife, and he fancied her, so jokes about the funny black man, all looking the same and being not untrustworthy and
Yeah.
those sort of things. And
The Jim Davison sort
Irishman,
of humour.
yeah, Irishman, all
Paddy Murphy.
all thick. All Irishmen were thick, and and all Jews were money grabbing, and would do anything to make some money. That's what comedy was. That's the world of comedy I grew up in.
Stereotypes, yeah.
And yet, I would not do a joke like that in a million years, and I find them offensive, and would point them out, and would So how is it over my lifetime that I've learned that? How is it that I've learned that when my mother didn't? My mother never learned that actually saying Jew like that, it just said, yeah, well, he's a. She always paused almost before she said it. She would almost go,
maybe
well,
a whisper.
Yeah, like saying it as if we shouldn't really say the word. Quite extraordinary.
It is, but then again, I suppose their sort of view upon entertainment would have been vaudevillian and that sort of thing.
They wouldn't
It was
understand.
all,
They just wouldn't.
Hello, my darling. It was all that. And
yeah. And you could, the innuendo of comedy, the comedy of innuendo, where you imply something but don't say it, was completely acceptable, and you could imply the most appalling things.
Exactly.
I mean, the most outrageous acts, which everybody knew about. Everybody knew what was being said, and we knew what they were inferring. But as long as you didn't say it, and the idea that people would now be saying it, and in fact, at the same time, don't find that offensive, but find, calling, talking about birds and dolly birds and a bit of skirt and things like that, and wow, she was asking for it. Those sort of phrases we would now find just go, whoa, what the fuck?
Yeah, it's but that's exposure. We've been exposed to that over the television over the past 30, 40 years. Whereas, my mother's generation and your mother's generation would have been, only exposed to that. There were no televisions. The theatres were far and few between. Most of the stuff up until the early part of the century, early to mid, was silent. The comedy was slapstick. It was all Laurel and Hardy and Charlie Chaplin and things like that. It was more wholesome, I suppose.
Yeah, until you got into the theatres.
Exposed.
Until you got into the musicals. You ever went into the musicals, you saw, you would see, what do you want? What do you want? A white book or the blue book? Come on, our blue book. Oh, I see what sort of audience you are. Okay, so I was walking down this, going mountain climbing, and this, this young lady came towards me, very attractive, short skirt and everything, and it was a very, very narrow pass we were going along. Well, I didn't know whether to block her passage or to toss myself off. That's a Max Miller joke.
Yeah.
And that's a Max Miller joke from the war, before the war.
Yeah.
So they were quite happy to go to theatres and hear people tell really rude. That's a really rude joke.
Yeah.
You'd be lucky to get away with that on the telly now.
Yeah, you wouldn't. And I mean, there are so many people out there that are quick to throw the word snowflake. I must admit, it does really piss me off. I mean, I'm a bit of a leftist, to be honest, right?
Really, I never would have guessed.
I'm all for equality and fairness and stuff like that. And I really struggle with people sort of making money from other people's misery like they are doing in this
no.
environment.
Or saying it's a dog eat dog world, and you should put up with it.
Exactly. But if you disagree with somebody, they go, "You fucking snowflake," and it's like, what?
Yeah.
There's. I was arguing with somebody. That was it. It's you've got Johnny Depp, who's going through a rather public, thing at the minute, and You know, he's a
Mhm.
victim of domestic violence, and I will always stand up for victims of domestic violence. I will always
Yeah.
stand up for victims of abuse, and I will always give them a platform, and I will always help them
Yeah.
give a voice. And one of my really, really close friends fell out with me over something similar, and it was over the what was her name? Caroline, girl that killed herself.
Oh yeah. Flack.
Caroline Flack.
Mm.
You know, because I spoke out about domestic violence against men,
Yeah.
and I think, and I said that, okay, there's probably extenuating circumstances. However, she should be held as responsible as a man would be held. That was it. I was blocked and off of Facebook and not spoken to him about since it's happened. And the same with Johnny Depp. I will fight for him because he's
Well, I
he
mean,
can't
the
use his
great problem
voice.
is that the great problem is he decided to argue that thing in the courts and lost. And it's a then you sort of go, well, so I don't know, you're gonna have to fight it again, really, because the courts decided that you were the abuser, which is, no matter how unfair you think it is, it was a mistake. I think you should have just gone, forget it, and just done the odd interview and said, she says these things about me, I say she was a drunk and a bit mad, like I was. We probably both were. I'm sure we were both guilty of certain things that we shouldn't have done, and it wasn't a happy marriage, and let's let it go. And
I
I think he
mean,
would have been wise to let it go, because I'm sure that the reality. Well, I'm not sure, but I would imagine the reality behind it is that there were times when he was a bit too drunk and a bit too unaware of his own strength and throwing things around, and and unaware of how frightening that can be for somebody who's not in that.
well,
But I'm sure there were also situations where she reacted in a way that he went, what the who knows.
I
We weren't
mean,
there. We
the,
weren't there.
no, we weren't there. We don't know the full thing, but at the end of the day, he's probably one of the way I see it is that he's one of the most famous men in the world,
Hmm.
who has used his voice to do great good for lots of different charities and things like
I've
that,
interviewed on my
and he
podcast,
can't
I
use
interviewed
it.
Kevin McNally. No, he can't. No, I've spoken to Kevin McNally, who's in all five of the Pirates of the Caribbean films with him, and is a very good friend of his, and says that he is one of the sweetest, most gentle, kindest, generous men he's ever known.
Yeah.
And that's his view of him. So, you do have to, nothing is black and white in this
But
world.
then again, um, he's publicly asked to resign from
Yeah.
Warner Brothers when his wife is flaunted all over Warner Brothers, and she's allowed to keep a part. And
Yeah.
it's bureaucratic bullshit as
It's a
far as I'm
very
concerned,
it's
and
just
it's
the whole
sick.
thing is terribly difficult. It's a very, very delicate path that we will continue to tread over the next, well past my life, I have to say. I'll be gone and I won't really have had contributed to it a great deal. But I do think that actually it's very important that people listen to people more and don't just make a decision about something and then doggedly stick to it. I think that's also the other thing, that actually one of the things that I've found late in life is that if I really do seriously listen to people, they can, and this is something that's never happened in my life, never, I've never accepted this, is that if I say something and people disagree with me, no matter how certain I am about it, if I listen to them and actually really listen to them and admit that what I'm listening to makes sense, then by fundamentally, it is my duty to change my mind and to accept that what I said and what I've always believed is wrong. And it's one of the most difficult things for almost anybody to do, is to go, well, I know that to be true. I mean, that's obvious, isn't it? Everybody knows that to be true. Now we'll watch it. We will watch QI, and they'll ask us a question. We will go, well, it's that, isn't it? And then it goes, meh, 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 and they go, well, it's not actually that. It's what everybody thinks it is, but that's not the truth. And we will laugh about it. But if it's something that you hold dear, if it's a view that you hold and you've formulated over a number of years because of everything you've seen and you think, and then somebody says to you, well, actually, that's not true. You go, it is because I know it. That's how I know it's true, because I've thought about it. I've looked at the things around me and I've come up with the conclusion that this is true. And they say, yeah, but it's not. And these are the reasons. And if their reasons are good enough, it's your duty to go, then I'm wrong. And it's an incredibly difficult thing to do. And the more we can teach ourselves, train, nobody will persuade you to do it. And nobody will ever you can't make people do that. They have to make themselves do it. You have to teach yourself to accept that you can be wrong. And it's a wonderful release. It is a brilliant, I have to say, it's taken me a lifetime to do it. It's taken me many years. I've had vehement arguments. I've become furious with people. I've almost destroyed friendships on the basis that I would not accept that I was wrong. No, I know I'm right. Don't try all that. No, I'm not even going to fucking listen to you. I know I'm right. And I've, it's particularly, you're a man who's been sober a few years, but you'll remember, particularly with a few drinks inside you, you just go, the mist goes in front of your eyes. I'm not listening. You're a bastard. You can fuck off.
Right, come on.
That's it. I've had, and I've had friends, very close friends. I had a close friend. And I was saying to him, I was trying to tell him he was wrong about something, and I'd presented what I thought was a perfectly reasonable argument about it. And I was more sober than him, and I was, I thought I'd made a good argument. And the fact that I'd made a good argument, and it was sort of an argument that he just couldn't see a way to counter, it made him so angry that he leapt across the table, knocking glasses everywhere and all the drink over, grabbed me by my scruff of my neck, pulled me towards him, and head-butted me right on the bridge of the nose. Nearly knocked me out. In my house. In my own house, he did this to me. And I forgave him because I realized how annoying I would have found that. I looked back at the number of times that happened to me, and I'd gone, no, I'd steamed with the fury of it. How dare they present evidence to me that counters my argument?
Nobody wants to be wrong at the end of the day.
Nobody wants to be wrong.
To be seen as...
But in fact, there's nothing wrong with being wrong. We're all wrong all the time. We make terrible mistakes all the time. And the sooner you learn to accept that about yourself and accept that actually it's not a failing. It's not a failing to recognize it. It's a strength. It's a strength to know that.
Exactly. I think the trap that we fall into is when we're wrong, is that we feel maybe shame, and we might feel a bit thick.
Well, it's like you're talking about the I'm sorry, I do once I get going, I do tend to talk a lot. I'm so sorry, I keep interrupting you, but no, it's fine. But you were talking earlier about that, the macho thing of, we've got to be, got to be a man. I've got to do these things. And that is part of it. That thing of, well, don't fucking back down.
Bravado.
Don't accept you. You're not wrong. You stand up for yourself. Don't let people push you around. And all that whole sort of attitude of things towards things, it's bollocks. People are not pushing you around. They just have a different opinion. And they're it could be valid. And if in the end you listen to all their stuff and you say, doesn't make sense to me, I don't agree with you, I'm sorry, I don't agree, it's no reason to punch them. It's no reason to get angry. You just go, I just don't agree with you. And they consequently also ought to be going, okay.
Yeah, but it don't happen really, does it? I mean, it's
no,
because people are, that they're stuck in the same sort of routine, the same mentality, and it takes a certain thing to get out of that. For me, to get out of that mentality took a massive event that put me in hospital for over a month, that
Right.
ended up with me with having brain damage through hypoxia, through stopping breathing for 4 minutes. And it's all part of my my journey.
Yeah.
It was that made me go, hang on a minute,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, I'm not, I've got to look at it one way, you know.
Well, then you and I have learned a lesson that very few people learn, and we're very lucky to have learned it. And
Yeah,
the sooner that lesson is learned, becomes a lesson that people want to teach, is a lesson that is taught in a way as part of education, that in fact people are deliberately are talking to young people and saying, you know what, it's not a sin to be wrong. It's nothing, there's nothing bad about admitting you
exactly.
didn't know something. There's nothing bad about saying, oh, I've got this wrong, and admitting, and accepting somebody else's argument. That's a good thing. To be taught, the problem is we're all taught it's a bad thing. And if we're taught it's a good thing, we wouldn't have politicians who refuse to accept they've made mistakes.
Exactly.
God,
Exactly.
wouldn't it be lovely to see one of those politicians stand up and say, well, we got that wrong. I'm so sorry. And we were going to do everything
It's
we
not going to
can to
happen, though, is it?
rectify it.
It's not going to happen. It's
But,
never happened in the history of politics, so
I
it's not
know,
going to happen now.
but, it never happened for it. You could almost argue, how long we had that system of things, probably only since the middle of the 19th century, really, this whole system of people standing in a room arguing with each other across the floor, and the whole system of how it works. So it's not that old.
Mm,
Before then, people went out and got drew swords
mm,
and had a fight.
mm,
So it's fairly new.
mm.
It can change. It can adapt. Let's redesign the Houses of Parliament so they don't sit opposite each other in a sort of
Yeah,
in an aggressive way. Us against you. Let's put them all
yeah,
in a thing together. Let's have a discussion. Let's talk about these things. It's perfectly all right for somebody to say we made a mistake. Anybody got any good ideas from any part of the group? It doesn't have to just come from my party. You got a good idea? Oh, that is a good idea. Well, we're going to do that now. That's good.
it don't
Let's
happen, though,
treat
does it?
this. But yeah, but I know it doesn't happen. But for many years, it didn't happen. That people, you said to people, I don't think we should be making jokes about black people, and they went, why not? Why? What's wrong with it? It's only a
Mm,
joke. Only a joke, mate. I mean, I'm just joking. Doesn't matter. Doesn't
mm,
matter that what's wrong with all those words? You can't call them that. You can't say that.
mm-hmm.
It's offensive. I don't find it offensive. It's just a word. Well, people get so angry about words. And
Mm,
all those attitudes, it's taken a long time. And there are many, many people who still haven't accepted it.
yeah.
But
I
they're
mean,
wrong. They're wrong. That's all there is
yeah,
to it.
yeah. I mean, I grew up in the 80s. I grew up in a small northern town,
Hmm.
market town that was surrounded by 7 or 8 pit towns. Um, so I saw firsthand the devastation that happened when all
Yeah.
those pits were closed, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Because
yeah. Absolutely.
being a market town, right, all the people that worked in the pits, they
Yeah.
came to our town to get and it was a nice little economy. And then that stopped, and people
Mm.
that had worked down the mines for 25, 30 years
Yeah,
got
yeah.
a nice gold carriage clock, a pat on the
Mm.
back, and told thank you. Um,
They
I've
should have worked at the docks. They got a fortune.
yeah, and then I've been very blessed to be able to sit down with men like Neil Kinnock and Arthur Scargill.
Mm.
I had tea and toast with Arthur, and these men were all the enigmatic men of my day. People
Absolutely, yeah. Great.
what's his name? Is it young Tony Benn?
Yeah.
Um,
Oh,
you
the
know,
great Tony Benn.
yeah, the
One of
great
the
Tony
great
Benn.
politicians of all
Um,
time, I think.
yeah, because
Mm.
these men weren't afraid to stand up and fight for families
The
like
men of
mine.
principle. The men
But
of principle,
now,
absolutely.
today, I've watched Keir Stammer, who
Yeah, yeah.
is a red Tory as far as I'm concerned. Um, people may disagree and go up against old Boris, having a go about the size of the school meals and about people profiting and stuff like that, when in fact that actually they're all profiting from something. So it's pot
It's a very
kettle
difficult
black,
world when most politicians
no honour.
main incomes comes from the fact that they own property that they rent out. And so when basically you're dealing with an entire parliament that's full of landlords, the world is always going to stay unjust. But on that, I'm going to have to go. I'm going to have to call a day, because we could go on like this forever. And I'm sure we agree on many points. I've always been I'm not even sure I'd describe myself as a socialist. I think I may be a communist, actually.
Yeah.
I'm all for world government where we impose things. Nobody's allowed to have you can't have more than a certain amount of money. You just can't. It's not fair. If you earn it, well done, good, but it goes into the common good. It comes into the pot, and we all benefit from the fact that we're all part of society. We're all part of humanity, and those people. And you never, no child will crawl around on a rubbish tip in India in flip-flops trying to find glass bottles to it's immoral, it's awful, it's dreadful. The whole of Africa won't have to wait until 2023 to get vaccines, because we in the West are all getting it now because we can afford to buy it. The whole world, I think it's all, people say communism, you give up I would give up those liberties. I would give up certain liberties in order for the world to be more just in other ways. I think I've lived in a very privileged world. I've lived a very privileged life. I've been one of those people who've benefited from all the wonderful things that happened after the Second World War. I benefited from all my life. I've had a national health service. All my life I've had state education. I've had grants so that I could go to university, full grants. They paid me to go. I didn't have to pay any money towards it. I got them all for free. I ended up buying houses for £28,000, where before the properties shot through the roof. I've now got a house that's worth over £1 million. It's just absurd. It's absolutely ridiculous. I've benefited from pension funds that if I'd invested in them 40 years ago, that money is now worth ridiculous. All my life, all I've done is benefit from society, and I think I'm a lucky bastard. I really am I've lived through a golden age, but the world is never that simple and never that fair, and we all need to be willing to give up things in order that other people have a little bit of that luck, a little bit of those benefits, just a little bit. For goodness sake, why as a world can we not organize it that everybody gets a decent education?
Exactly.
Everybody. Exactly. It's so simple. We just say it has to happen. We just agree it has to happen. No. I don't want to hear any arguments against it. This is not something this is not something we compromise on. Every child gets educated. And you look what happens to the world when that happens. The moment that happens, after that investment, which is tiny compared with investment in other things that they're doing, tiny amount of money to make sure that every child gets a decent education, and that every child has reasonable health care, and that every child has a good diet, and the world will be astonishing. Because you're talking about overpopulation. Populations will fall because you won't need to. Won't be losing like we do in Victorian times. Won't all be losing every third child. It's a terrible thing that we just accept that when they don't have to die. People will not be dying from malaria because they don't have to. People will not be dying from diseases that we would never accept in this country. We'd never accept them being allowed, and we can stop them. We have the means. We have the means, and yet we just won't do it. It's absurd. What is different? What is different between a person their child dying and your child dying?
Exactly.
Think of the pain. The pain is exactly the
Yeah,
same. And
it
you
is.
have the way, we have the means to stop these things. And the fact that we don't is absolutely immoral. The
It
fact
is.
that we publish on the front page of our newspapers, oh, look, the man who owns Tesla is now, is now more rich than the man who owns Amazon. Oh, isn't that exciting? No, it's not exciting. It's sickening. It's absolutely sickening.
Hmm.
This money shouldn't be with this one person. It should
No,
not be in the power or the gift of one person. It's absolutely absurd. These are not sultans. These are not sheikhs,
no,
kings, the emperors.
no.
It's absurd that we allow these people to be these people simply because they had an idea for a company.
Hmm.
Great, well done. Well, keep 100 million of it.
Hmm.
It's a lot of money,
Yeah.
and give us back the other, 1,500 million.
Hmm.
And we're going to spend that on children who are starving and
Yeah.
children who've not been educated and people who don't
Yeah.
have proper healthcare. And not only that, who's to say that from the small little group of people that we properly educate in the world
Hmm.
and that we properly care for and give decent healthcare to, from those small group of people, we
Hmm.
expect vaccines to be developed, cancers to be cured, the problem with the whole environment to be solved from that small group of people. When we have the whole of humanity, who's to say that the cure for cancer is not in the mind of a child living in a poor mud hut in the middle of Africa? That
Exactly.
child is the person who's going to have the thought, the moment's thought that cures it. And that is
Exactly.
the person we should be giving the opportunity to come up with that idea by educating them, by giving them a start in life and providing them with care and support. And I think that until we do that as a group of people, as a race of people, as a one person, before we accept that the whole world, we are all responsible for each other. Until we
As a
do that,
standard.
we're doomed. We're doomed. We're fucked. If we
With
don't do that, we are fucked.
yeah,
And that's my philosophy.
that's
There
a
you are.
great philosophy. Thank you ever
Thank
so
you.
much for coming on.
Lovely
I've
to talk to you.
truly enjoyed it. It's been absolutely brilliant. We'll have to get you back
Good.
on for a part two.
Well, I'll have to come up. I'll have to come up to Norwich when we can do all the travelling,
That
and
would be great.
I'll go for a beer, and you can have a soda,
A coffee, yeah.
a
I
coffee.
like the coffees, yeah.
Lovely.
Yeah, brilliant, mate. Thank
All
you
right.
ever so much for coming on. Thanks, guys, for
You're welcome.
watching. As always, one notice the Jasvinder Sangera is now going to be a week later because we're going to put some proper advertising into that and try and get some big numbers. Thank you, everybody, as always, for tuning in. It's been absolutely fantastic. I've noticed that there's been quite a few comments to this video, so I'm going to have a
All
look.
right. Have a browse through.
And yeah, it'd be great to see you again. And with that, I shall sign off stream.